Hi, everybody. I appreciate you making it tonight. This is New Hampshire Peace and Justice Conversation Series online for Monday, April 6th of 2026. I just really want to express my gratitude to you all for being here. Um, my name is Jeremy Love, and I'm the National Field Organizer for Back from the Brink and a supporter of New Hampshire Peace Action. Previously, I was an intern with New Hampshire Peace Action many moons ago, and later served as a member of both the C3 and C4 board of directors of New Hampshire Peace Action. And there was a little stint where I was on the board of National Peace Action for a little bit. And it's really wonderful to see you all tonight and share the space with you. Tonight's topic is nuclear weapons spending and our taxes. I'm just going to say boo to spending our taxes on nuclear weapons. New Hampshire Peace Action educates, mobilizes, and organizes to build a more peace and justful future for all. We envision a future where international relations are based on cooperation instead of competition and conflict, and where mutual benefit and shared security lead to a more peaceful and just global community. In the spirit of understanding and respect, we'd like to take a moment now to acknowledge that we're doing our work here in New Hampshire on the traditional ancestral homeland of the Abenaki, Pennacook, and Wabanaki peoples past and present. We honor with gratitude the land and waterways that they've been stewarding throughout the generations, and I just want to take a moment to sort of silently show some respect for that. Thank you. As a reminder for some Zoom guidelines, we're happy to have you keep your video on so we can see your faces and feel connected. We'll keep your audio muted for now. You can use the chat to share reactions and ask questions that we'll get into in the second half of the program. And we'll also call on folks to speak later on too if you feel so inclined. Before we begin, I personally would like to just take a moment to center ourselves. This is some really heavy material, and frankly, it's even heavier times. And we gathering together right now is really important. So if you're comfortable, I'd like for all of us just to take a moment to take a slow, deep breath in and then let it out slowly. And again, breathing in slowly and out. Thank you for taking a moment for that. May we enter this space grounded, present, and connected to each other. So now let me introduce tonight's presenter and program. We're grateful and excited to welcome Dr. Bob Dodge, who will be giving an overview of his nuclear weapons community cost project, which is either in his 37th or 38th year now, which is really, really fantastic. Bob will share some background on the project, walk us through the latest national data on nuclear weapons spending, and reveal the new total U.S. spending figure. He'll then shift into New Hampshire-specific data, highlighting what communities across the state, including some of our larger and more prominent cities and towns, are paying towards nuclear weapons. Bob retired from 45 years of practice in Ventura, California on December 31st of last year and has been engaged in nuclear abolition work for more than 45 years. He sees this work as a natural extension of his medical practice, a prescription for survival. He's served on the National Board of Physicians for Social Responsibility and currently co-chairs the Committee to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. He's also the immediate past president of PSRLA, where he continues to serve on the board, and is active with Back from the Brink as a member of organizational and operational committees. Most importantly, what motivates him is being a husband, a father, and a grandfather of two wonderful grandkids. And we're especially thankful that he was kind enough to join us from a family ski vacation in Colorado. So he's actually taken time away from the slopes to talk to us about our tax money. So Bob, thanks so much for taking some time with us, and I'll let you take it over from here.
Great. Well, thank you, Jeremy, who's a wonderful colleague, and all of you for allowing me to be here this evening. Yes, this community cost project, this is actually my 37th year in doing this. I started years ago doing it, and it's wonderful to see the faces on the screen. I always like it when they're there. I mean, I can appreciate some people having to put their name only, but just I see we're, I'll just say a mature audience. And so many of us remember at the end of the Cold War, there was a lot of talk on economic conversion. Our little community has a base and we can't close it because it's so meaningful to our community and the likes. And I actually started doing calculations back roughly in that time frame because in my little community in Ventura County, California, we have a major, Port Hueneme military base. And they saw the military dollars coming from the government. Well, when we calculated what we were spending out of our county on nuclear weapons programs, we were actually spending more on nuclear weapons programs than we were ever getting back in terms of a jobs program. And most of us, I think, on this call will agree the military was never envisioned as a jobs program. So it's been really backwards. So I've been doing this for the years. And I just will say, for me, it's been a wonderful way to connect, to make connections, because you could be a conservative fiscal individual on either political party and say, wait a second, we're spending that in my community on nuclear weapons when my pet projects are this. I mean, how can we do that? So it's actually been a nice way to kind of bridge the gap. In the years since I've worked with Back from the Brink, I think pretty much every city or community in the nation that has a Back from the Brink resolution has used a figure to say what their community is spending on nuclear weapons. And so as we start tonight, again, throughout this talk, I want you to think about how, if you were in charge, how would you spend those dollars? What would you do? What are your priorities? What do you want for your family, for your grandkids, et cetera? So that's sort of the story. I'm going to be sharing 15 slides, and many of them are just cities going through, very importantly. But that said, I'm going to stop and pause periodically just to address any questions as we go along. I will say, traditionally, because this is I've always done this as a tax day project. It's released nationally with sort of a press release on April 15th. So you are the first group getting it. It gave me an extra push to have to get it done to meet with Jeremy and you all this evening. But what I would say is, and I hope people will maybe take the numbers. I'm happy to have you reach out to Jeremy or to Amy and ask if you need further follow back. But my point is the number actually is we call it embargoed right now. It's not going to be released to the press until the 15th. It's a big national press release. So feel free to write, but if you have questions, Jeremy can get you back in touch with me. I'm happy to help out and things. So, as I say, we mentioned, so we can sort of start up just with the first slide. So, and again, as I mentioned, we're in the 37th year. Back at the peak of the Cold War in 1988, there were 60,000 warheads in all the global arsenals. The Cold War ended December 26, 1991. And in our country, the last underground test in the United States was actually in September 23rd, the next year, in 1992. And we had tested 1,032 tests from 1945 through 1992. Now, concerning this is the rhetoric we've all been hearing over this past year about, well, maybe we should resume testing, et cetera. All of this, highlights the fallacy of detention. I mean, I'm sorry, the fallacy of deterrence, excuse me, not deterrence, detention, but deterrence. It's a myth because if we start testing, Russia will start testing. If Russia starts testing, so, I mean, it just implodes, and that's part and parcel to the arms race. If I have one nuclear weapon, then you need two. If you have two, then I need four. If I have four, then you need eight. And so thus and where we've ended up where we are. So we're going to talk a little about the state of the world today. So next slide. So I'm sure this is just a very brief, but I'm sure most of you are aware, but the latest figure by the Federation of American Scientists is that we have 12,187 warheads in the global arsenals today. This said, every major nuclear nation is rebuilding and modernizing their arsenals as we speak. And so the insanity of this, and I'm sure every one of you is aware of the nuclear famine study, where basically a small limited nuclear war between India and Pakistan using roughly 100 Hiroshima-sized weapons would ultimately kill 2 billion people on the planet. 100 weapons. We have 12,187, so do the math there. Next slide. So, and again, all of you saw at the beginning of the year, just a few months ago, that the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists released their infamous doomsday clock and moved the minute hand closer than it's ever been to midnight at 85 seconds. This is the closest, going all the way back to including the atomic bombings. So, and they've done it for multiple reasons. The lack of communication between the nuclear nations, the risk of cyber attack, and the attack by misinformation. So, so again, it's a very dangerous time. And even since January, we've all found, the current war, again, that is ongoing, certainly in Ukraine, again, and now our war on Iran, everything. I mean, the majority of the nuclear nations have been at war in this past year. So it's unbelievable. And the risk is very scary. Next slide. So tonight I'm going to talk briefly about what we spend on nuclear weapons. And my figure is a very drilled down figure in terms of our entire nuclear budget. You'll see numbers and, the wonderful organization that I've had communication with over the years, International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, they try to do a number globally. This is what the United States spends, this is what Russia spends, this is what Israel spends. But they're just basically looking at warhead to warhead to warhead. They're trying to compare apples to apples, but it's not the entire budget, and again, which is much, much, much higher, unfortunately. So I love this quote. Many of you may be familiar with Sojourners magazine, but the original, kind of editor-in-chief was Jim Wallis, who I'd had the pleasure of meeting several times over the years. And he used to say, budgets are moral documents. And I think it really, to me, resonates. It's interesting. President Biden's father was famous for saying, show me your budget and I'll tell you what your values are. So I think, again, these are important things as we look at this. Next slide. So how much do we spend? Okay. And as I mentioned, I want you to think as we're going through this, how would you spend these dollars? So again, the next slide is the calculation of this year. So this is the cost to United States taxpayers for this tax year 26, which is our, again, sort of fiscal year 26. And so that's $137 billion, 230 million. Okay. Those are what we're paying on all nuclear weapons programs this year. Okay. So again, how could you possibly think about spending those dollars otherwise? Next slide. So that equates to $261,092 per minute. Okay. Every minute that we're here this evening, if we spend 20 minutes together, et cetera. Again, next slide. And here's sort of how I go through the calculation. The current census. So I use the United States Census quick facts. And so their current latest population, which gets adjusted every few months, so again, is 341,784,857. And the average income of every man, woman, child across the nation is 44,671. So those are numbers we use when we say, well, you're this much above poverty or below poverty or above the per capita income. Okay. So just a simple division there, it says that the average taxpayer is paying, again, $401.51. So now if you make twice that, you're paying twice that, or 10 times, you're paying 10 times that as your contribution to the United States nuclear weapons programs. Next slide. So this is the figure to New Hampshire this year. Okay, so I apologize that one I didn't. It's funny in the draft presentation it didn't do that, but it's $671 million plus of your treasure is being spent on nuclear weapons programs this year. Next slide. And I've kind of broken it down. So now I'll even come back and we don't need to go back on the slide. But so now it's interesting because when I look at what I also do in my calculations, so some communities across the nation are very wealthy. They may make twice that 44,000, or they make 1.5. So New Hampshire as a whole makes 1.18 times the national. So your basic average income, per capita income for the state is 52,000 versus the 44,000. Okay. So So here we have Concord, I think. So at any rate, so Concord is spending 18,907,529. And so Concord is at a 1.05 modifier, so a little bit richer. But then with the very next one, we'll come to Exeter. And Exeter is a much wealthier per capita. So the expenditures there, again, are $5,838,576. And again, and this is for a population of 10,000, roughly 10,000. So it's quite a lot of money. Again, I always say of your treasure that's being spent on weapons that can never be used. And should any one be used, it's basically the end of the planet and life as we know it. So it's sort of like, okay, how much are we spending to light the fuse, basically, if you will? So next. Now is for Manchester with a population of 116,000 in current census, 46,805,458. Now, actually, before I run through, I want to stop even right here. Are there any questions right now on where we're at and just thoughts or the way this is figured out?
Amy's got her hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Is this outside of the rest of the military budget?
That's a good question. It's just outside the rest of the military budget. And the answer, so actually, I'll digress slightly. It's basically within the military budget, but but what is the military budget? And so it's so interesting because, you allow me to expand. It's not a transparent. You can't look at the federal budget and say, what do we spend for nuclear weapons? Okay. You can look under the Department of Defense and it'll say, well, this is what they spend on nuclear programs. But then a significant portion of our nuclear expenditures are in the Department of Energy. They're in charge of keeping all the weapons and things of this sort. And now I also include, because if what I look at in this, and this is again a comprehensive figure, I'm looking at everything. So I'm also looking at the nuclear legacy, from our past testing, storage, and again, and manufacture, the contamination of communities. So what we're spending on that, what I call the environmental legacy. There's a very small and unfortunately shrinking portion that deals with, it used to be called the non-Lugor cooperative threat reduction, which is basically to safeguard old U.S. Soviet Union weapons, to safeguard them so they didn't fall into the wrong hands. We're ever shrinking that, which increases the risk of falling into the wrong hands. So much, and the monies that were spent on breaking down and basically taking apart nuclear weapons, that's shrinking, because now what they're doing is saying, oh, we just pulled off one nuclear warhead, and we're not going to do what we're bound by the treaties to do. We're actually now going to hold on to it and repurpose it to a new warhead. So we're seeing a shrinking budget on that. The other aspect that if we didn't have nuclear weapons, we wouldn't need, but a big part of what's called the national missile defense, what Reagan called Star Wars, which is a pipe dream, is in this. So, and this year there is, the current administration has very almost sneakingly funded it. It's actually in the budget, but then they slipped in they call it what I'm going to say, a remuneration. They added in another 10 billion. So it's over 25 billion on the Golden Dome, okay? Which again, isn't to hit, it's to hit a bullet with a bullet, if you will. But again, that's not in the quote military budget. It's in the space agency. And so it's amazing. And there's now, which is actually not in my figure, RECA. Many of you may have been involved and are supportive of RECA and things, which is wonderful and was part of the big, beautiful bill. It was probably the only part of the big, beautiful bill we like, but it's contentious, was an expenditure of roughly 15 billion a year over the next 10 years, but that's up in all sorts of machinations. So that's not included in my figure. But it's interesting when you look at that, that's the Department of Justice. So you've got all these moving shells. Okay. So again, anyway, hopefully that answers the question.
I think it does. And I just want to dial in on something. Chris Hansen, I see your hand and I'm going to call you on just a second, but I've got this sort of piggyback thing. Because at the top of the presentation, Bob, you mentioned sort of lightly that there's a discrepancy like between sort of the figures that you come up with every year and the ones that I can send out the email that I assume many of us get. And I just really wanted to express my gratitude for sort of drawing the distinction between like sort of how you're getting this sort of larger sort of figure because you're tapping into the other things where like this money on nuclear weapons programs hidden. So it's like less comprehensive what ICANN's doing, which explains sort of all of that. So just thank you for getting into the weeds on that. I
Yeah.
think that
And
it's
and I
meaningful.
know Susie Snyder, who's been one of the heads of that for years. I've known Susie since she was first hired, and so she's well aware. And so many of the times, I don't know what they're going to be doing right now. I mean, their last calculation was basically last year, but they will usually mention our work, saying for a more comprehensive view. But they just said, we can't talk about legacy of the environment in Russia, and we can't do this. They said we're just going to say, okay, you got this many bullets. How many bullets you got? And so that's basically what they're doing.
Yeah, thank you. Chris Hansen, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Your figures you mentioned per capita or per taxpayer, are they
Per
based?
capita, per capita.
Okay, that $401 is
Yes.
per
For every man,
baby
woman,
and
child. So
baby
a
and old
newborn,
man and everything. Thank
yeah, that's
you.
right. A newborn born today, that's their portion of the pot. Okay. All right. We can go back. I think I just have a couple more slides, but just again, yeah. So Jeremy, you want to go back to the slideshow? There we go. Okay, so Manchester. Okay, so Manchester again has a population of 116,000 plus. Your modifier is you're basically right on the national average, so close to the national median income. I'm sorry, per capita income. So 46,805,458. Next one. Nashua. Okay, so Nashua, again, with its population of just under 100,000, 98,000, has a per capita income 52,000, putting it with a modifier of 1.18, but the total nuclear tax is 43 million plus 393,386. And I have a final one for Portsmouth. So for Portsmouth, also Portsmouth is a relatively wealthy community, and so with again your population of 22,000 plus, just shy of 23, has a per capita income we talked about nationally at 44. It's 72 in Portsmouth, so that gave it a 1.62 multiplier, and is say so for the combined amount of 14,928,334, and again for a relatively small community. Again, 22,000 folks spending $14 million of their treasure on nuclear weapons. And final slide, I think that really wraps up where I'm at. But again, it's sort of just a factual hit point and sort of where we are. But again, I invite any questions. And my main thing here is this is an opportunity for you to think, how would I spend those dollars? And I have found over the many years, it's a great way to go meet with city council people, county supervisors, whatever party they're in, and just say, let's talk about the budget. Let's talk about your priorities. And what do you think about this? And I found it's a pretty interesting bridge thing. So, yeah. So questions? We just didn't anymore.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. So we've got quite a bit of time available to us to have a discussion about any questions that folks have about the cost community numbers that Bob so generously crunches all of the details and numbers for. I've tried to run this calculation myself, and it gets pretty complicated. So I really want to just express my gratitude for Bob taking the time to crunch all these numbers for us. I see a hand up. The first one in the queue is Ken. So Ken, if we can get you unmuted.
Yes, I did a little research more from the environmental impact, but one of the things that came out of that was that the supply chain of nuclear, mining has a very detrimental impact on, for example, the Native Americans who live in Utah and places like that. Their groundwater is contaminated. There's a very high incident of cancer. So in addition to these per capita costs, there's also an environmental and human cost in terms of let's call it the supply chain to get uh, the nuclear material, the uranium, and so forth.
Ken, that's a very, very important point that is very dear to me as well. And you're right. And I'm going to tell you, this calculation does not by any means fully incorporate all of those costs. They are huge, and that's going to be probably a next chapter to try to further glean that out. It's further complicated, and right now with this new race to develop small modular reactors, nuclear reactors, and we have to get more uranium mined and whatever and things. Well, a little secret that I have forever felt, people say, well, Bob, you're with Physicians for Social Responsibility, you're against nuclear weapons. Are you against nuclear power? The answer is an absolute yes. Nuclear power, I say, is the cover story for nuclear weapons, okay? When one industry, if the nuclear weapons industry needs more, they will say, well, but it's also good for civilian power. If the civilian uranium chain needs more funding from the government, they say, oh, but it's also good for our defense. So, whatever. I mean, the science is the same. It's just a little more thousand, centrifugations, et cetera. And you're absolutely right. This is always done in communities of color, indigenous communities, and things in, them, further highlighting the whole problem of the military industrial complex of us and them. This is in their community, in them and things. And it's immoral. So, but your point is very well taken and could probably have an entire discussion on that alone. So yes, thanks, Ken.
Bill, it's nice to see you, and I see your hand raised.
I just wanted to announce something that Mass Peace Action has planned for May 3rd, a Sunday, the Hibakusha. These are the survivors, last remaining survivors of the nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They're coming to North Cambridge, St. James Church on May 3rd, and I will be posting with NHPA an announcement of that event. I wondered if our speaker has any connection with the Japanese and if they're doing any education the way you are doing.
Well, again, so the answer is yes. I mean, again, the chapter of Physicians for Social Responsibility that I've been the president of the last 10 years and just finally was able to turn it over to a new generation, which I'm so excited about, but is in Los Angeles and has a huge, Japanese community and things, again, and a large hibakusha. So we've worked with them many times over the years. Very often at some point, whether it's for the Hiroshima and Nagasaki days, where I'm in Little Tokyo speaking, et cetera, and things. So yes, I mean, I'm very familiar. And I mean, part of this whole thing is I feel we owe it to those final survivors to abolish these damn weapons. But again, so it's a push. But they're so wonderful. And I'm sure every one of you's heard a talk or whatever presentation by them. They're just such amazingly loving people. So yes, thanks, Bill.
Well,
A little bit of awkward silence time. Bill, you were going to add something maybe?
You're all invited on May 3rd.
Thank you.
We need audience to support the Hibakusha. This reminds me of when a Japanese, young Japanese person who was in that movement came to my psychology classroom at the University of New Hampshire and, educated us about what had happened. And at the end, she asked us to write down something on paper about what she'd learned. And from that exercise, I learned that she was hoping for an apology, and she didn't get one. Subsequently, I incorporated a class on Japanese apologies, into my psychology and race class because Americans don't know about the culture of apologies, which the Japanese have developed very highly. And it's quite an embarrassment, actually, that we as the perpetrators have never publicly apologized, as far as I know. Prove me wrong.
I just makes me think about one other item, Bill, and I appreciate those comments. And you talked about young people, and again, I'm presuming that was in a earlier time in career. But today, again, so first of all, we're very fortunate. We're getting a thriving, a new group, new generation of students involved with Back from the Brink, and it's called Students for Nuclear Disarmament. We have them at several of the universities, more in the East Coast, but we're trying to develop that same energy in the West Coast. But again, just kind of keying in my brain there, Bill, and that is a group that we've really been across the nation and world, but also very fortunate in Southern California, and that's Soka Gakkai. And Soka Gakkai University is just down out of Malibu, and these are young, largely young, Asian, but not all, and I've given talks to their groups. And it's so amazing to see these young people because boom, they're right there. They get it. And I think that's the biggest issue for all of us. I mean, we're, again, a mature audience here. And the key, I mean, students get it if they get the information, if they get the talk. And so that's a big part of our work collectively with Back from the Brink is getting talks out to the young students, to the universities, to the high schools. I'm trying to develop a high school program in my community, et cetera. So, but yeah, that's critical for this next move. So, yeah.
May I mention Dr. Ira Helfand in Massachusetts?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you don't need to mention him to us. Me and Ira are buddies, and in fact, Ira and I just did an event with Carly Berriant back in January at the Durham Community Church, which is pretty well attended. And we were trying to get folks to sort of engage with some of our advocacy actions at that event. Bob, I want to thank you for mentioning Students for Nuclear Disarmament, bringing that up because that is something important to talk about and something that was kind of co-founded here in New Hampshire. There's he's now at Yale as a freshman in the poli-sci department, but Rishi used to be a senior at Phillips Exeter and was turned on to the issue of nuclear weapons by a talk by Ira Helfand. So we owe much gratitude to Ira and all of the heavy lifting he does to raise awareness around this. I mean, he's on Democracy Now! Pretty regularly with Amy Goodman, which always brings some joy to my heart, even though the content is often pretty heavy. But it's always nice to see him pop up. And then another thing, too, is I also want to thank Bob for his mention of Soka University because Amy and I just sort of were planning an event with one of the professors who teaches there, who I can just share sort of his little bio page on. And I would just advise folks to be on the lookout for the announcement of that event, although it kind of escapes me, Amy, as to when we planned that for. Was it like August?
Yeah, I can look it up.
But we don't need a date right now. I just thought it was maybe August. I couldn't remember. But in any case,
July or
like
August.
yeah. So those are two really awesome things that are happening. Soka's doing really some great education, activating younger folks, and then we have sort of the sister project with Back from the Brink, which is the Students for Nuclear Disarmament, where they're essentially creating high school and university chapters all across the United States. And then last, I would highlight that my understanding from conversations with some of the folks at Students for Nuclear Disarmament, that the youth that they're talking to are particularly motivated by the spending component of this. So they're outraged by the war, they're outraged by what's happening in Gaza, they're outraged by what's happening in Iran, and they are puzzled by these numbers of what the U.S. government has traditionally been spending on its war making, and that includes also the nuclear weapons stuff. So I'll end there. Amy, I see your hand up, and I also want to note that Paul Krautman has his hand up, but he actually has a physical hand up.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you could see that. I do have questions, but let's have
Go to
Paul
Paul.
go, and also there's one in the chat. So let's start with Paul. Go ahead, Paul. Paul, you should be able to unmute now. Can you do that? Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, with April 15th coming up next week, I wrote a letter to the local newspaper about the cost of war, blah, blah, blah. And perhaps some of the people in other parts of the state can do the same with some of the figures that Bob has presented to us, the figures on a local basis. I wish that I had had your figures today when I submitted this letter to the Keene Sentinel, because the gist of my letter was, folks, this is what it's costing you, but this is not what it's costing each of us in Keene, which is, we're kind of similar to Portsmouth, which is like $15 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's all I have to say. Perhaps folks around the state can do the same, can use Bob's figures to write to your local newspaper. Thank you.
And I just will add, and both follow up on what Jeremy is mentioning, that, young people, when they hear, they're enraged. How could you let this happen? Whatever. But to your point also, Paul, and where I was trying to say that the nuclear figure for many years, well before this, has been a bridge, because many people say, well, I support the war in, I don't know. I mean, we're always at war. I support that war. But, oh, what up, nuclear weapons? No, we can't use them. So whatever. So, I mean, I've actually had military people say, no, I mean, I want the budget for military to come to me, not to go to the nuclear folks, because we can't use any of their damn stuff. So, and so it's very interesting. So, yeah. So it's often, again, a bridge. Yeah.
Want to go
Jeremy,
ahead, Amy?
there's a question.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'm glad that you drew my attention to that. Bad facilitator.
No, it's okay.
I can totally. I'm so used to it just being like conversational, I forget to read the chat. So, Joanna, my apologies. If you want, I can just read it out loud. But if you want to take some space to unmute yourself, you're welcome to. I'd like that, but no pressure.
Usually when people put it in the chat, they're happy to have it in the chat.
Fair enough. I think she is trying to talk, though.
Well, I will.
Can you unmute now? No? One sec. There you go.
Fantastic.
Yay.
It said that the administrator had to unmute me. I'm zooming in from Australia, so thank you for letting me join in. Thank you for your talk. I was wondering if there's any data on AI involvement in nuclear weapons. Does it increase or decrease the risk of accidental firing? Does it change the clock?
Yeah, that's a terrific question. So, in the recent years, so I appreciate you asking that, and welcome. And I think what time are you? In the middle of the night or something like that? But anyway, with the doomsday clock, they've used artificial intelligence or what they call disruptive technologies, which includes AI. So it has been involved in their calculation. They're remarkable scientists and social scientists and whatever, and many of us in this field feel the clock should be moving even closer, but they're very so close right now. I think they're freaked out. But yes, it has come into the calculation in the past. An interesting thing within the last quarter or so, they put several scenarios because the military has looked at AI as a way of, well, let's take out some of the human frailty and decision making in nuclear launch, if you will, and let's see if maybe they can do it more more thematically and things. And so they put the aspect of launch to AI, and basically like 95% of them said launch, 95% of the scenario. So it does not in any way secure us, and probably should scare the crap out of us, if you pardon my French. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
And it's 9 a.m. here.
Okay, all right. That's very reasonable. So I'm gonna
Yeah, thank you for coming or well virtually attending all the way from Australia. That's really nice. And I just in the chat I just shared a Politico article about this. And if I can find what Bob was just referencing, which I also saw that report too, so I'm going to do a little sleuthing around the internet to see if I can find that. But yeah, there was a very scaring article about the results of some simulations that AI ran. I'm going to pause and acknowledge Ken here.
Yes, I was going to say that it seems to me that at the core of all of this is that if you want to develop these weapon systems, let's say as a government or an entity, what you have to do is to create an existential threat, whether real or not. And I happen to believe that these are not real threats. You just can make it up. In other words, if I were to say, guys with gray hair that like to hike are the most existential threat to New Hampshire. And if I said it enough and I got that word out, there'd be a lot of people against me and would want to eliminate me. So I think, and this is just my simple way of thinking, is that we probably have to develop systems to refute that threat. And that's what the real challenge in my mind is. I think about this. Sometimes it keeps me awake at night, but I think about like, how do I refute like the people who we're threatening with nuclear weapons? They're really no threat to me personally. I'm just a guy that likes to go out and hike in nature. I absolutely have no threat to these folks, and they have no threat to me. They're probably just trying to survive and live a life and feed their kids and maybe educate themselves. So how do we as a group, even on a local basis, refute this existential non-existent threat, but in a lot of people's mind, it's a real threat. And that's always been the challenge to me.
And that's another great question. It's interesting. In the 1980s, I was involved and sat on the international board of an organization called Beyond War. Many of you may have seen that. And basically, the recognition there was that in this nuclear age, war is obsolete because any war will ultimately end up annihilating the planet and things. So, and a large part of that was a wonderful international movement. And I think many people who have been involved with that over the decades, I mean, it went away sort of at the end of the Cold War. They sort of like, well, we morphed. It was an always moving, evolving organization. And they felt, and I'm like, nuclear war is not done. We're not done with this. I think the risk is obviously much greater, but the hierarchy went on beyond. But my point was, it will be there was a big part of to make real the whole military operation was the point of enemy making. We have to make enemies. Okay, so if we can continue to make enemies, that justifies the existence of these massive militaries, these massive expenditures, etc. So enemy making, enemy posing was the whole thing. And their thrust, and many of you on this call may have certainly been familiar with Beyond War, was that we are one. We're one human planet, one human species on this a small, blue marble in space, and we'll either learn to live together or we'll die together. I think so. Yeah. So yeah.
Amy.
Yeah, I'm going to ask at least one of my questions, and then there are some more coming in. But I'm interested in, you've been doing this a long time, and I'm wondering what the reception has been. Have people been interested? Has that, is the interest increasing, for instance? Do people grasp how, how big of a drain this is on our communities? What is your experience in interacting and talking with people over time?
Yeah. So my experience has generally been positive. I mean, I've never really had anybody come up saying, "No, that's terrible. Whatever. Oh, these we need more. Whatever. We should double that expenditure." I mean, it's generally been very well received. Again, having been involved, I mean, I was a we call full practice family practitioner. I did from obstetrics to significant geriatrics my entire career for 45 years, ending on New Year's Eve, whatever. But again, so I did what I could. But I mean, in the simple answer is yes, it was actually very well received. And I think the message of this talk tonight, and basically what we're doing with Back from the Brink is getting this message out. I think when people, I don't think it's a situation where so many people are opposed to it. I think they're not aware. I mean, they've done studies at Ivy League colleges in the last decade. They said, they go and they say, okay, Amy, you're here at Harvard. How many nuclear weapons they have? And they're asking, and these are the brightest of the brightest kids, 100, 6, 4 million. I mean, they don't know. But when they do hear, and again, this also, translates to communities. I mean, I do talks at our, Rotary clubs. I do talks at, I mean, I always say, have talk, will travel. And I do basically the same, I've done the same talk that Ira does for 45 years as well. Ira, again, so, but these things, when, I've done the old fashioned BB drop up. This is the equivalent of our arsenals, which just chills the room and the like. So, but I think when people hear, they get it. And what's really, I'm just going to say, having done this for so many years, but Back from the Brink has, because we're a collective. I mean, we're now like 500 organizations that have endorsed across the nation. It's really a grassroots coalition. Nobody owns it, but the nice thing, it makes the connection. I think that's what's been so empowering for me at this point. Okay, so I really think it is moving forward.
Thank you, Bob. Something that I wanted to draw attention to, and I had to jot down these numbers real quick. So in the presentation, you had a slide that crunched the numbers, and I like this. I was using it in sort of the outreach and organizing stuff that I was doing a couple of years ago when the number was much different. But a per minute number that the United States spends on nuclear weapons, which I think is a good way to sort of create a scale so that people can understand it in terms of things that are digestible, as opposed to $136 billion. Like, that number just doesn't make sense to people. In 2021, the United States was spending $67,000 per minute on nuclear weapons. Then fast forward to 2024, the number is $173,000 per minute. Fast forward to today, that number is $261,000 per minute. So in less than 6 years, it's jumped like a ridiculous amount. Math's not my thing. I wish I could just like close my eyes and tell you what percent change that is, but I'm not that good. But I mean, $67,000 per minute in 2021, and now we're at $261,000 per minute. Back when it was 67, what I used to tell people was, imagine how much it costs to hire a middle school teacher in our state for a year. And you can bet it's probably around $67,000. So per minute, we could hire one middle school teacher back in 2021. I'm scared to even do the math on how big or how many people we could hire for $261,000 per minute. I mean, it's just staggering. So I just wanted to draw attention to that, because I frankly, it really sets me back on my heels. And I don't know if you have any comments. I mean, really, it's just kind of a statement of fact, Bob. But if you wanted to add anything.
No, I appreciate it. And so and that's the thing. It's astounding to me. It's so funny. Just to give an idea, it takes me about 10 days of kind of intense. Oh, I'm just going to sit down tonight and drill down and drill down. And when I finally put it again out, I have all the I have all the line items from the budget, from this, from that, whatever. So to document. So I don't want anybody to say, oh, your numbers are full of crap. So I can back it up. But I mean, and while I'm doing it, it's actually quite a headache. I'm not really contemplating what the total number is. And so I mean, it was. I guess Friday night, I finally sat down. Holy cow, that's a big number. That's up, 20 some billion from last year and things. So, but I mean, I never know. And again, but no, I appreciate, and I do these various calculations, the per minute, the per hour, whatever, because different things stick to different. It's like the old adage of take a handful of mud and throw it against the wall, and whatever sticks, that's fine. So I just, if something resonates, and that's why also this year I wanted to have the number for an average family of four, et cetera. So what they're spending. But I mean, different numbers resonate, but it's all astounding. This is all money that could be used to just to build our world so much more humanely. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a perfect example of the guns versus butter thing, that I think that we all, really struggle with watching our government prioritize war making, fear mongering, and terrorism when they could be spending things that lift up the people here in the United States. I want to go to a question in the chat. So Chris Hansen said that he's alarmed about Trump sort of threatening the use of nuclear weapons and saying that there might be some more extreme attacks on Iran. Is there anything to assure him about this? Bob, what do you think?
You know, I I don't think there's with this administration, I don't think there's anything to reassure us about anything. I mean, in his past administration before, he was always saying, well, if you have nuclear weapons, why can't we use them? So I mean, this is a guy who just goes back and forth. One day he says one thing, 1 hour he says one thing, the next hour he's saying something else. I think I mean, this whole thing in Iran is so scary. And I mean, if things go badly for Israel, boom. I mean, they're not going to sit where are they buy. They're going to launch. And if they launch, well, what are China and Russia going to do? What are some other players going to do? I mean, I mean, we're sitting here at the brink and things. And so, yeah, I do not find it in any way. I don't have any real comfort to because it's so. I mean, if I was writing a novel, people would say, well, Bob, that's too crazy. No, that's not possible. That's again, and we're in this dystopian novel every day.
Yeah, that's the way I feel too. Amy, you had your hand up a minute ago and now you don't.
Well, I can always say something. I wanted building on that, and this idea about over time. One thing that Seacoast Peace Response has done for years is a penny poll. I'll give you information on that later, folks, in which people get to come. They have this setup where you put pennies in where you want our tax dollars spent, and it very consistent that nuclear weapons never wins, never. And we making this case badly about the military budget in general, including but not just nuclear weapons. And last week we had some quotes come out of this administration that really couldn't have illustrated our point any better. When we have Marco Rubio saying, what's wrong with Iran? They imagine what they could do for their people if they didn't spend all this money on weapons. And I think the next day, Trump says, well, we can't have Medicare, Medicaid, childcare, educate, we can't have any of these things because we have wars to fight. And, some of this also ties back to, and what I'm hoping is that's going to make people get, what some of us have been, really trying to highlight and educate people about, as you said, Bob. And also what Ken was saying, like, we're really caught in some other, someone else's story here that isn't benefiting barely any of us. And I wonder what you think about this moment in time as a possible way to, and to put a bit of a, from an organizing perspective, a really good time to bring people in and help them understand this more deeply and become more committed to working on this.
Yes. So this point in time, it's interesting. So, I mean, I've done this for so many years, and people will ask, well, Bob, aren't you discouraged and whatever? And I say, I'm concerned. And I see there's certain situations that make me discouraged. But what gives me hope is working with amazing people like everybody on this screen that I'm seeing tonight. And because people get it, and I'm an eternal optimist. I mean, if I really felt that we weren't going to make it, you wouldn't see me anymore. I'd probably be back enjoying the California wines and things. But from the standpoint, when I give talks just generally on the nuclear threat, and if you will, I tell people I'm convinced we will abolish nuclear weapons. We will either do it in the legally bound, time-honored stance of the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, or we'll use them. Okay, and so but in one way or another, we will abolish these weapons. And so. So I really have little doubt about that. So, but I feel as long as we can, I mean, we were on borrowed time, we're on very fragile time, but I think working together, I think we can do it. I think that's the only thing, and that's what gives me positive outlook again. I guess this moment, there's no better moment than the present. Okay, but it's a very scary time, and I'm very scared. I'm very scared. Jeremy said at the beginning, for my grandchildren who I'm spending this week with, amazingly here. I have a 2-year-old and a 9-year-old, and the world that we're leaving them is very scary for me. And so that's why I feel I must do everything I can to prevent that. So yeah.
And I'd add, I appreciate, Bill, you sharing a bunch of mass peace action stuff, but there's New Hampshire peace action right in New Hampshire that's doing wonderful things. And I'd actually like to spend some time lifting up New Hampshire peace action, and also highlighting that there is a Back from the Brink hub based out of New Hampshire that I lead. And I would welcome anybody who's eager to get involved with anti-nuclear weapons work in the state to email me. I just shared my email in the chat, and I welcome all of you. If you're enthusiastic about helping save the world from the threat of nuclear weapons and pushing it back against this exorbitant spending, that's the way to do it right here in New Hampshire, is to do it through New Hampshire Peace Action's work and to do it through the Back from the Brink hub that's based out of New Hampshire. So I just really strongly encourage all of you, go ahead and participate in the stuff at Mass Peace Action too, because this is a yes and situation. But I do want to draw attention back to New Hampshire Peace Action and the Back from the Brink hub here, because that's where the nuts and bolts work of anti-nuclear weapons stuff is happening in New Hampshire.
Yeah, and I actually want to just chime in as I was answering, I think, one of Amy's earlier questions about having done it for so long and whatever, and presenting, and do people, how do they respond to the numbers or the presentation? And again, it's really beholden upon us as presenters and whatever to show that there's action to be taken. And that's one of the things that's really, I mean, again, having done this for so long, from the physicians to Beyond War, I sat on the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation. Many people were on their national board for years. But again, this is the greatest collaborative work that I've done ever in my years. And so, and we try to leave each talk, there's much that we can each do. So that's the key, because otherwise, again, if you just give here's the disaster and there's no hope, there is hope, and there's much to do. And the fact, Bill, as you're saying there, working in coalition, that's the key. We're all working together, trying to move this, a risk away and eliminate it. So.
Oh, well, maybe that's a good way to punctuate the end of the event. If there aren't any other comments or questions or anything else.
Yeah.
Bob, do you have any closing remarks?
No, I just want. Go ahead.
Don't forget my part.
Oh, yeah. No, I was going to do that. Yeah.
So I just want to again thank you all for being here. It's we do this at nighttime when we'd rather be doing something else, or watching one of those great shows you were talking about on Netflix earlier, Jeremy and Amy and things. But I mean, we're here doing this. It's the hard work, but working together, we're a wonderful community. So I really encourage that. And I think I'm already forgetting which one of you talked about their op-ed again. But if you want information, that was Paul, I think. If you have or want information, please don't hesitate to reach out to Jeremy, and he'll put you in touch with me, because I'm happy to help anyway. I'm happy to help you ghostwrite something, whatever. So again, because the more we can get before the public's eye, the greater the chance we have of doing this.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm going to start to wrap this up. So I want to again extend my gratitude to Bob. He's on family vacation at a ski resort right now and stepped away from the slopes to do this for us. So big hug to Bob for doing that. And thanks to everybody who came out to be a part of our conversation. You can learn more about Back from the Brink, or if you'd like to get involved with the campaign here in New Hampshire, as I was talking about earlier, you can just reach out to me at jeremy@preventnuclearwar.org. I'd love to hear from you, or you can visit us at our website, which is www.preventnuclearwar.org. And you can stay in touch with New Hampshire Peace Action by checking us out at newhampshirepeaceaction.org and look us up on Facebook for more about what we're working on and what's next in our programming. And the next series conversation will be in 2 weeks. And I'm going to hand it off to Amy to give you a little heads up on what's coming up next.
Yeah, thank you. And there is a lot coming up next. So I'm just going to zip through a few things. I just want to make sure people know that all these things are coming up. We continue our vigils for just peace in Palestine. That will be this week, Wednesday, April 8th, 2 p.m. outside or near Representative Pappas's office in Dover, the corner of Central Ave and 3rd Street. Thursday, April 9th, noon to 1, folks will be at City Plaza in Concord. And on Wednesday, April 15th at 2, we're at Senator Shaheen's office, outside her office in Dover. And we have lots of other important programmings, both online and in person. Here, let me go through a few. What is that? Wednesday night, 2 nights from now, April 8th, 7 p.m. The film, The Voice of Hind Rajab, is showing at 3S Art Space in Portsmouth, followed by Q&A facilitated by Not in My Name, New Hampshire. The next day, Thursday, April 9th, 7 p.m. will be on Zoom for a New Hampshire Peace Action Night. And we're going to focus on Iran with a special appearance from Eitan Meborek from the National Iranian American Council to talk with us about some of what's going on legislatively that we can agitate for. This Saturday, April 11th at 1 p.m., there will be a bird dog training in Concord, New Hampshire, led by Arnie Alpert and Olivia Zink. We still have some spaces open for it, so you can sign up. Next Monday, April 13th at 7 p.m., Not in My Name is hosting the film Coexistence My Ass at Red River Theater in Concord, which is an Israeli comedian's one-woman show about the struggle for equality in Israel and Palestine. And then this relates very much to what we were talking about a few minutes ago. Tuesday, April 14th, 7 p.m. on Zoom. We are collaborating with a group of other organizations, including MAPPA, to host Linda Pence Gunter. She's going to talk about her book, No to Nuclear, Why Nuclear Power Destroys Lives, Derails Climate Progress, and Provokes War. And then I mentioned the penny poll earlier. So Wednesday, April 15th from 11 to 1, there will be one. Wes, I think, is here. It's going to be bringing all the stuff to Market Square, Portsmouth. It's a great way to talk to people and learn more and educate. So we would look for volunteers. You can go the whole time or a little bit of time or just put in your pennies. It's a great event. And then I need to tell you that on Sunday, April 19th, 7 p.m., Not in My Name, New Hampshire Peace Action, and others are very excited to be hosting an evening with Peter Beinart at 3S in Portsmouth. Really excited. We've had him on Zoom, but he's not easy to get in person. And so this is like, won't likely happen again. So come and join us. He's going to be talking about his book, Being Jewish After the Destruction of Gaza. Our next Peace and Justice conversation via Zoom is Monday, April 20th, 7 p.m. It will be about connecting climate justice and peace with Pat Hart from 350 New Hampshire, which brings me to my very last announcement, I swear. The following day, Tuesday, April 21st at 6:30 p.m., a group of organizations led by environmental orgs is bringing the film The Earth's Greatest Enemy to Red River Theater in Concord, New Hampshire. And this film is about how the U.S. military is the world's largest polluter and how their environmental impact is just tremendous with no accountability. So, thanks for hanging in with me. There's some stuff we have going on, and hopefully you can come to 1, 2, or all of those events. And even more is coming up. If you stay in connection with us, keep an eye out on our whether our Facebook page or our web page. Keep up with our events, and we know that action is the answer to despair. Joan Baez said, and Bob really kind of reiterated earlier. So, being in this struggle together, knowing that we have a chance to change some things in it, just that are so important, is a privilege. And thank you for being with us. And Jeremy, back to you.
Yeah, so I've just got like 2 more sentences and then we're going to wrap. So this conversation series is going to remain free and open to everybody because it's such a benefit. However, we deeply appreciate any financial support that you can give so we can keep doing this work. So to donate, you want to go to newhampshirepeaceaction.org/donate to make a donation. And I hope you have a great night, and I really appreciate you all being here with us tonight. Thank you.